Hello, everybody. What's going on? This your girl Tiffany coming through here live in effect. Today, I'll be dealing with the topic about Black archaeologists. And so, one of the Black archaeologists I want to focus on today is Theresa A Singleton, who is an African American archaeologist, and her field of study is dealing with the Africans and the diaspora. And also, I want to share some information about the website called the sociology. I mean the psych. Excuse me, the Society of Black Archaeologists. So the Society of Black Archaeologists put their main focus on Black people that's in the archaeological field of study. So with that being said, the reason why I am on this subject, and hello to the chat. The reason why I am on this subject because I believe that it's very important that we really start giving credit to those African Americans or African descended brothers and sisters that are a part of the STEM program. And that's really doing the diligent work into the STEM community. Also, with by this being archaeology, a lot of Black people are not really exposed to the factual information about their history regarding to their ancestors here in America and in other parts of the world. So it's only important because when we talk about history, history is important, but also the archaeology is important because archaeology really tells the story of the bloodline, the lineage. Also, it tells a story about the people that were here and what type of struggle they've been through and whatnot. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And thank you guys who have been subscribing to my channel. Thank you for sharing my videos and subscribing and also making sure that you hit the notification bell. I really appreciate it. It really means a lot. So hopefully I can keep this channel going in the future and there's a lot more to come. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get started. Let me introduce y'all to Miss Theresa A. Singleton. All right. So right here, I'm on the Wiki1 website, which is Wikipedia. So on this website here, according to the information, here's the introduction. Theresa A. Singleton is an American archaeologist and writer who focuses on the archaeology of African Americans, the African diaspora, and slavery in the United States. She is a leading archaeologist applying comparative approaches to the study of slavery in the Americas. Singleton has been involved in the excavation of slave residents in the southern United States and in the Caribbean. She is currently a professor of anthropology at Syracuse University and serves as a curator of the National Museum of Natural History. So down here, this is her biography. Singleton was born in Charleston, South Carolina in April 15th of 1952. She attended Bishop England High School, where she graduated in 1970. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree at Trinity Washington University, formerly known as Trinity College, majoring in anthropology archaeology in 1974. She then attended the University of Florida, where she earned her Master of Arts in anthropology. In 1980, Singleton became the first African American woman to earn a doctorate in historical archaeology and African American history and culture. She began her research career by studying the Gullah Geechee of coastal Georgia. In 1991, Singleton worked as an associate curator of historical archaeology for the Smithsonian Institution. Singleton and Elizabeth Scott created the Gender and Minority Affairs Committee in the Society of Historical Archaeology. In 2014, she became the first African American to be awarded the J.C. Harrington Award. Singleton has served on a number of editorial boards, including the International Journal of Historical Archaeologies, World Archaeological Congress, the Journal of African Diaspora Archaeology and Heritage, over a dozen other professional boards and committees. Now, these are her words. The Journal of American History called The Archaeology of Slavery and Plantation Life, which was written in 1985, edited by Singleton, a nobility coherent group of papers that allow historians to look in new and stimulating direction to analyze the past. Singleton also edited I, too, am American Archaeological Studies of African American Life in 1999, which tells the story of anonymous Black Americans forgotten in written records. And Singleton's most recent book, Slavery Behind the Wall, an archaeology of a Cuban coffee plantation, which was written in 2015, is a monograph that situates her excavation at the Cuban coffee plantation of Captivia Bahajas. I don't know how to say that, within the comparative context of Caribbean coffee and sugar plantation. All right, so, and here are the bibliography that was selected. So that's all the information that was put on here by Wiki1. Now, I do have some sources by her. I have her book, and I also have an article that she written back in 2001, which deals with slavery, spatial dialectics on Cuban coffee plantation. So we're going to go into that. All right. Now let me go ahead and get started on that. So, let me show you who Miss Theresa Singleton looked like. So for those of you that are curious. All right, I have a picture. Give me one moment. All right, so right here, this is the picture of Miss Theresa A Singleton. That's a picture of her. All right, then. So what else I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some articles, and I'm going to show you a book, one of the books that she has written. So I don't want to overload you guys with a lot of information, but I just want to show enough information so you guys can read on your own. All right. So right here, this article is the one that I was telling you all about. It's called Slavery and Spatial Dialectics on Cuban Coffee Plantation. So, and it was published by World Archaeology. Again, the reason why archaeology is very important because it tells the history and the origin of people and what they did. So also it's a part of anthropology because anthropology studies humanity. So one of the ways you can study humanity is looking at their historical background. You go into the process of excavation. Now, some people may not believe in excavation, and that's fine, but that's important so you could be able to give an estimate year, a time, date, and what event took place, because that's where a lot of DNA information is encoded, which is lied in the person's fossil or in their bones and whatnot. So you find a lot of DNA information, you find a lot of genetic information there when you're doing the archaeological research. So yes, that is very, very important. But let's go ahead. Let's look at the introduction to this. So this is the article that was written by her in 2001. The introduction say Cuba imported, let me zoom it up. Cuba imported more than 1 million enslaved Africans from its beginning as a Spanish colony in 1511 to the abolition of slavery in 1886. Of that number, over 780,000 enslaved Africans came to the island between 1790 and 1867, making it the greatest slave importing colony of Spanish America and the center of the 19th century transatlantic slave trade of the Caribbean. Slave importation of this magnitude transformed the island's economy from one of the diverse activities in which no single activity defined the slave experience to a plantation economy based upon racial slavery. As in other Caribbean islands, sugar monoculture fueled Cuba's plantation economy, and in 1840, Cuba became the world's leading producer of sugar. Although sugar set Cuba's plantation economy in motion and determined its overall direction, coffee production played an equally significant role in shaping plantation. Even when Cuba was the leading producer of sugar, the number of coffee plantations outnumbered sugar plantation. One of the most striking features of the Cuban plantation is what historian Moreno Fernagos referred to as its jail-like structure. This characterization aptly describes many slave management practices adopted in Cuba, particularly those implemented to contain slave activities. One such practice, discernible in extent in extinct ruins of plantation buildings, was the housing of enslaved people in prison-like quarters. These quarters were often locked at night and carefully watched by guards. Such surveillance measures seem extreme when compared with those of slave societies in Anglophone America, and therefore raises several questions. Why did plantation slavery in Cuba develop this jail-like character? Were the surveillance measures effective? How did enslaved people respond to this situation? And so it goes on to say this paper examined these questions by analyzing written sources, ruins of extinct plantation buildings, and preliminary archaeological data recovered from the slave quarters of a former Cuban coffee plantation. So far, what we know is Cuba was known for producing coffee and also producing sugar. So, of course, many Africans, like the Africans in America, was working under harsh condition, and they were suffering, and of course, they many part was suffering from malnutrition as well. So slavery for Cuba was very brutal, like it was here in America. It was very brutal. So the people was out working hard in the sun, not getting enough minerals, not getting all the things they need. So the way that Dr. Singleton described in her article, jail-like, of course, it shows that they were treated like prisoners. So you know that it was free labor. They weren't getting paid to do the work at all, obviously. So just like America had the agenda to build its economy, that was the same way with Cuba, to build its economy. But it was ran by the Europeans. So it was ran by people that were Spanish background. Their goal was to build their economy, to earn profit. So let's go ahead and continue. The early Spanish settlers brought enslaved Africans with them to Cuba, but the slave population remained one of the lowest in the Caribbean until the second half of the 18th century. Cuba was slow to develop a slave society like those of the English and French islands for several reasons. First, the Arciento system, which granted contracts for slave trading, restricted the number of enslaved persons that could enter specific regions of the Spanish Empire. Second, the colonial settlement pattern of 16th and 17th century, Cuba was designated or designed for a sparsely populated cattle economy. Third, the absence of a legal mechanism for private land ownership and the Spanish crowns hampered the development of agriculture. Now, the event removal of these obstacles combined with the void in sugar and coffee production resulted from the demise of slavery in Saint Domingue, which is Haiti now, ushered in favorable condition for a plantation economy in Cuba. A planter class emerged from the Cuban-born elite and immigrants from other Caribbean islands, North America, and Europe. Today, they produce a plantation society that historian Robert Paquet described as the best and worst of times. These best of times for the Cuban planters resulted in the displacement of small holding whites and the brutal use of African labor. Also, it goes on to say Cuba's coffee economy largely developed from the efforts of transplanted French exile escaping from the Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1802. Experimentation with coffee cultivation, however, presumably occurred as early as 1748. Coffee was produced primarily in the hilly and mountainous regions of both eastern and western Cuba, but the prosperity of the early 19th century coffee economy was concentrated in western Cuba in the provinces of Havana, Mataza, and Pa Rio. By 1830, investments in coffee production in Western Cuba were equal to those in sugar, and the number of enslaved workers employed on cafetales, coffee plantation, was often equal to that in the Ingeniero Sugar's plantation. Thus, coffee production was an important component of the development of the plantation slavery of Cuba in the first half of the 19th century. Now, coffee was always a secondary crop to sugar throughout the Caribbean, but it had distinct advantages over sugar. Its land requirements were small and large initial investment in machinery or buildings were unnecessary. For these reasons, coffee attracted planters of diverse economic and social scales, whereas sugar was generally restricted to the wealthy. Coffee, however, also had its drawbacks depending on the variety of coffee. It took 4 to 7 years for the plants to mature. Because because of the lag time between the initial investment in land and labor and the generation of income, coffee was also economically more complex and the trade tended to be more erratic than that in sugar. Cuba's coffee boom was short-lived and several factors brought the demise of coffee production in Western Cuba. In the 1830s, Brazilian coffee became a major competitor of Cuban coffee. Prices in the world coffee market dropped to about one half of previous prices. Tariffs, wars between Spain and the United States. So tariff is import taxes and export taxes. So the taxes that you have to pay to import items into a country and the taxes that you have to pay to send items out of the country. That's what tariffs is. Anyway, tariffs war between Spain and the United States caused Cuba to lose the United States as an important market for its coffee. The United States raised its tariff on Cuban coffee in retaliation for Spain's high tariff on flour entering Cuba from the United States. Hurricane in 1844 and 1846 destroyed numerous coffee plantations. In the years from 1854 to 1859, planters abandoned their coffee plantation, converting some into sugar plantation. Several former coffee plantations inspected for this research project were never reoccupied. Therefore, these sites offer archaeologists an opportunity to study slavery and plantation life from well preserved contexts. All right, so I'm just going to stop here. And if you guys want to dig into more information, just type in World Archaeology, and it can be found on www.tnfonline.com, which stands for Taylor and Francis website. And it's a peer reviewed website. And not only they have peer reviews, but also scholarly sources. That's just very reliable. So you guys can go on there and look it up. And you can type in Slavery and Spatial Dialectics on Cuban Coffee Plantation by Theresa A Singleton. So, and she wrote this article in 2001. All right. So you guys can look up more information about that if you would like. Hello to the chat. Peace to the chat. I hope everybody doing okay in the chat room. Peace to the chat. Shout out to Love Mingo. Oh, excuse me, Love Mango. Shout out to Love Mangoes. And shout out to E-Maze. All right. So I want to also share another source, which is called I Too Am American. All right. Okay, I'm back. I don't know what just happened, but anyways, yeah, if you guys want to, you can also check out this book called I Too Am America, which is also written by Theresa A Singleton, where she edited the book. But let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so right here, this book is called I Too Am America, Archaeological Studies of African American Life, Theresa A Singleton, at the University Press of Virginia. Okay. All right, so it was printed in 1999. So this is a poem by Langston Hughes. It says, I too sang America. I am the darker brother. They sent me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. No, nobody dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. Langston Hughes. All right, so these are the table of contents. An introduction to African American archaeology. Then you got the part one, African American identity and material culture. Part two, which is the West Africanist reflection on African American archaeology. So it's different authors that or different editors that wrote this book. So I just want to be able to focus on the subject, the title, which is Theresa A. Singleton. So let's go ahead and let's look at that. So here's some more information in the table of content. Oh. All right, so that's the acknowledgement. All right, so here's the introduction. All right, the introduction goes like this. The archaeological study of African American life has become a well established research interest within the American historical archaeology, referred to as African American archaeology or archaeology of the African diaspora. It is no longer seen as simply an effort to capture unrecorded aspects of Black history or to bring attention to the heritage of a neglected community. Many archaeologists recognize a message of Langston Hughes' poem I Too. You cannot fully understand the European colonial experience in Americas without understanding that of the African. This heightened appreciation of African American archaeology is transforming its goal from the study of a forgotten people to the study of the formation and transformation of the Black Atlantic world. The archaeologists engaged in this research are increasingly concerned with issues such as the analysis and representation of cultural identity, race, gender, class, cultural interaction, and change, relation of power and domination, and the social politics or archaeological practice. This is collection of essays epitomize the changes vision of African American archaeology and reflects the broad spectrum of studies that characterize this research. The purpose of this volume is to identify promising areas of research that can lead to new ways of looking at the archaeological record of African American life. All right, so moral mission archaeology sought to interpret the everyday lives of African Americans from their own perspective, using the remains of housing, food waste, and personal effects recovered from excavation. And so, excavation is basically when the archaeologists go and dig in the grounds to collect evidence, to collect fossils, or to collect the bones or whatever remains is left over from the time period. It succeeded in giving a voice to the voiceless, but many of the interpretation were overly simplistic. African Americans communities were perceived as bounded, insular enclaves, as was the case in nativistic approaches in cultural anthropology, capable of reproducing material aspects of African culture. This view of African American life ignored the complex social relations involved in the formation and maintenance of the cultural identity of any group, and it was particularly unsuitable for the study of African Americans who were forced to occupy a subordinate social position. Further, by choosing African survival rather than its demise or reconfiguration as a research focused moral mission, archaeology established a research proceeding that still stalks African American archaeology today. The search for cultural markers linked to Africa as the most significant aspect of African American material life. All right, so also, it goes on to say effort towards analyzing social complexity in African American archaeology began in the mid 1970s. Its application to the study of African American life was perhaps best articulated in Robert Schroyer's edited volume Archaeological Perspective of Ethnicity in America, Afro-American and Asian American Culture History, the first attempt towards synthesizing archaeological studies of African American as well as Asian American sites. Using a cultural evolutionary framework, Schroyer stated that ethnicity had little meaning until complex structures arose based on political domination. He specifically chose to examine African and Asian Americans because they represent distinct cases of subcultures being incorporated into Anglo-American society. Although not all studies in his edited volume examined some complexity in their discussion of ethnicity, some of them were, in fact, moral mission studies. The volume paved the way for the inclusion of African American archaeology under the more general study of ethnicity the process of group identity formation that can be either self-ascribed or ascribed by others. It goes on to say widespread adaptation of ethnicity as an approach to understand intergroup difference de-emphasize or replace race as a social construct in analysis of cultural phenomena. Yet the use of ethnicity has often failed to specify the condition under which social groups subordinated as racially distinct emerge and persist. In archaeological literature, ethnicity is often equated with race. Therefore, the exceptional differences between European American ethnic communities and racial minorities have been adequately addressed. For example, the authors in Schroyer's edited volume recognized that experiences of African and Asian Americans were different from ethnic communities of European descent, but how those differences frame the experiences of African and Asian Americans, making their lives different from many within which the archaeological data were evaluated. All right, so, and to stop right there, that's the information. And if you guys want to look more into this, you can go ahead and check out the book. It's called I Too Am America Archaeological Studies of African American Life. Okay, written by Theresa A Singleton. All right. So I have a website that people should check out. All right, so right here, the website is called Society of Black Archaeologists.com. Society of Black Archaeologists.com. This is the website. And let's look at the history behind it. Why did they create this organization? So it says the Society of Black Archaeologists was created in 2011 with 5 goals in mind. First, to lobby on behalf and ensure the proper treatment of African and African diaspora material culture. Two, to encourage more people of African descent to enter the field of archaeology. Three, to raise and address concerns related to African peoples worldwide. Four, to highlight the past and present achievement and contribution that people of African descent have made to the field of archaeology. Five, to ensure the communities affected by archaeological work at not just as objects of studies or informants, but are active makers and or participant in the unearthing of their own history. All right, so it says the vision of the Society of Black Archaeologists is to create a strong network of archaeologists that advocate to ensure the proper treatment of African and African diaspora material culture, promote more people of African descent to enter the field of archaeology. So basically the same thing. So right here, it got all the board members. As you can see, all the board members are of African descent. All right. Okay, so let me go on to the home page. So here's a video right here. Let me go ahead and play this video. All right, so I'm gonna play the video and I'm going to put myself on mute so it won't be for that long.
All right, we just got the green light. that recording has started. I want to thank everyone for joining us from around the world tonight, this evening, this morning, wherever you are. Welcome. My name is Ayana Omilade Llewellyn. I'm one of the co-founders of the Society of Black Archaeologists, a board member of Diving with a Purpose, a University of California President's Postdoctoral Fellow at the University of California, Berkeley, and I'll be starting a tenure track position at the University of California, Riverside in the Anthropology Department starting July 1st of this year. I want to open this Zoom session by giving thanks to our co-sponsors for today's event, the Columbia Center for Archaeology, an interdisciplinary center at Columbia University dedicated to fostering conversations among archaeologists from different disciplines. The Theoretical Archaeological Group of North America is an offshoot of British TAG, was founded at Columbia in 2008. It aims to think critically about archaeological theory and archaeology's complex engagements with the world. The next TAG conference will be hosted by Stanford University. And the Society of Black Archaeologists, a nonprofit organization that promotes the proper treatment of African and African diasporic material culture, promoting community engagement and collaborations within the field, raising and addressing concerns related to African peoples worldwide, and highlights the past and present achievements and contributions of African descended people in the field of archaeology. Before I introduce our esteemed panelists, I want to place this conversation within its historical context, which I'm sure, as many of us being archaeologists, would appreciate. I want to invite you to acknowledge and honor the Native and Indigenous land stewards who cared for the land we now occupy and call home. Here, where I'm based in Los Angeles, I reside on occupied Tongva people's land. I want to root this conversation in the ongoing work that our Native and Indigenous co-conspirators who began the fight against injustice within the field of archaeology here in North America. The table, we, archaeologists and heritage professionals, have built to undo ingrained practices of systemic anti-Black racism in our field rest atop the work of our Native and Indigenous scholars. Welcome to a seat at our table, a table hand-carved by the labor of esteemed scholars of African descent in the field, from George McJunkin to John Weasley Gilbert, the Black women crews of the WPA-sponsored Central Archaeology Lab, and those who excavated at Iron Mound, to the work of James E. Lewis, Olivia Christian, and of course, Theresa Singleton, the first Black woman to receive a PhD in archaeology in the United States of America in 1980. This conversation is steeped in the current hypervisibility of anti-Black racism that has led to the deaths of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Tony McDade, and Tatiana Jefferson, Aurora Rosser, and an ever-growing list of names that rest as a testament to the genocidal practices of the police force in the United States. Like these brutal acts of violence that have sparked uprisings around the world, testifying that anti-Black racism is global, this conversation is not new. As we gather here today from all over the world, many of us practicing archaeologists and heritage professionals who ordinarily in our own silos of historical or prehistoric, industrial, or perhaps more regionally specific niches of Mediterranean and Mesoamerican archaeology, we found ourselves gathered here under the call to shift, to change, to reckon with, in order to bring about a more just and inclusive practice in our field that not only values the past lived experiences of the people that we study, but values the lives of the African and African diasporic communities impacted by our work, as well as the African and African diasporic people that we call peers, colleagues, and students. Never have so many of us found ourselves pulled from those silos to share a common desire for action, change, restitution, and justice. This is the work happening at this table. Welcome. We've been doing this work for a century, and we welcome you to join us. So thank you, everyone, for logging on, for signing up for this event. I want to open this up and start with an introduction of our panelists, and I'll start with our moderators. Dr. Maria Franklin, and I can actually stop sharing this. We could see everyone in gallery view. There we go. Dr. Maria Franklin teaches in the Department of Anthropology at the University of Texas and is also affiliated with the African and African Diasporic Department. She has published on the archaeology of Black experiences from colonial slavery to the Jim Crow era and the racial politics of the discipline. She currently serves on the board of directors for Jamestown Rediscovery and the advisory committee for the Levi Jordan Plantation site, historic site in Texas. Dr. Justin Dunavant is an academic pathways postdoctoral fellow at Vanderbilt University's Spatial Analysis Research Laboratory and will be joining the faculty of UCLA's Anthropology Department as an assistant professor in the fall of 2021. While his previous research interrogated the history and representation of minority groups in Southern Ethiopia, his current work in the US Virgin Islands investigates the relationship between ecology and enslavement in the former Danish West Indies. Justin has conducted archaeological research in the US Virgin Islands, Belize, Jamaica, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Mozambique, and the Gambia. In addition to his archaeological research, Justin is also a co-founder and the current president of the Society of Black Archaeologists, an AAUS scientific scuba diver, and consults for the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. Sion Wolde Michael is a curator of African American social justice history at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. Her work focuses on decolonizing museums through innovative approaches to community engagement, collections management, cultural heritage preservation, and exhibitions, including the landmark Slavery and Freedom show at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Her international work through the Slave Rex Project has included assignments in South Africa and Mozambique to recover first known objects from underwater slave shipwrecks and work with local public history institutions to reinterpret colonial collections. Sion's decade-long experience in the field of public history also extends to digital media and online exhibitions, writing for academic publications, teaching and lecturing around the country. Projects include the Special Joint Smithsonian-wide initiative to document the history of the Black Lives Matter movement. She holds a BA in Women and Gender Studies from Macalester College and an MA at Harvard University in History, where she is currently a PhD candidate in the same field. Dr. Alicia Oduale is an assistant professor of anthropology at the University of Tulsa, apologies. Since 2014, she has been researching archaeological sites related to Afro-Caribbean heritage in St. Croix, US Virgin Islands, but has recently started researching and teaching about sites of Black heritage in Oklahoma. While she continues to research both urban and rural sites of enslavement in St. Croix, her latest research project based in Tulsa, Oklahoma, seeks to reanalyze historical evidence from the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. Launch new archaeological investigations in the historic Greenwood District and use radical mapping techniques to visualize the impact of the massacre through time on the landscape in Greenwood. She is the co-author of the #Tulsa Syllabus, an online research guide that dives into the history and archaeology of Black enslavement, land ownership, anti-Black violence, and the rise of prosperous Black communities in Oklahoma. Her research has received awards and support from the American Anthropological Association, National Science Foundation, the Society of Historical Archaeology, the Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission, Tulsa Community Foundation, SREB State Doctoral Scholars Program, and the Digital Archaeological Archive of Comparative Slavery. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Alexander Jones. Alexander Jones is the founder and chief executive officer of archaeology in the community. She is an educator focused on community archaeology, outreach, and service. Dr. Jones has been an educator for more than 16 years. She has taught in multiple educational environments, from primary schools to museums, colleges, and camps. She's obtained dual Bachelor's of Arts degrees from Howard University in History and Anthropology in 2001. Dr. Jones became a classroom teacher and discovered she had a natural talent for teaching. In an effort to further her career as a teacher, she continued her education, obtaining a master's degree in history from Howard University, and then attending the University of California, Berkeley, to obtain a PhD in historical archaeology in 2010. She currently teaches people of all ages about archaeology. Dr. Jones has worked for PBS television show Time Team America as the archaeology field school director, where she directed field schools for junior high and high school students at each of the sites for the 2013 season. She is currently a visiting professor at Goucher College and an adjunct professor at the University of Baltimore. Dr. Jones serves as the board of directors on the board of directors for the Society of Black Archaeologists and the editorial board for the Journal of Community Archaeology and Heritage. So that was a mouthful, but so much to explain and share just the expertise alone that's on this panel. So before I hand this over to Dr. Dunavant and Dr. Franklin, I wanted to tell our attendees that we have a Q&A section that many of y'all have been using. While there are a number of questions that will be covered by the panelists, feel free to drop in your questions in this Q&A section. You can also uptick questions, and I see a couple of you have already started that. Those questions get pushed to the top. So if someone has posed a question that you also feel deserves to be answered, feel free to give it a click and it'll swing up to the top, and we'll try and get to as many questions as possible. So without further ado, please, Justin, Maria.
Thank you, Ayana, for that wonderful start. So I'll go ahead and start with the first question about Black Lives Matter. I mean, we've seen this movement in the past. It's been ongoing. It's had very little influence in our discipline. So what do you think is different about this particular moment in the movement, where it seems to be signaling, hopefully, a sea change, not just more broadly in society, but also in our institutional practices?
I think everybody's fed up, being quite honest. It took 8 minutes and 46 seconds for globally the world to get fed up with things that we have been complaining about for years. And to your point, I think this conversation at least started back in 2013. If we talk about the Society for Historical Archaeology, it started back then. We are now in 2020, and we're still having this conversation. It took 8 minutes and 46 seconds of us watching the life seep out of a man for us to recognize we can't do this anymore. So I think that's what's different.
Alicia, did you have any comments about, any responses from the other panelists about that?
One thing that's different now is that before, when we had movements for social justice, it was easy to identify your
All right, so that's the website from the Black Archaeologists. So you guys can check out more information if you want to see the video. All right, so the title of the website is the Society, I keep saying sociology, but Society of Black Archaeologists.com. Society of Black Archaeologists.com. So you guys can check that out for yourself. But anyways, I'm going to get ready to close it out. So this is your girl, Tiffany. And thank you guys for watching. And thank you guys that has been subscribed to my channel, checking out the video content, sharing the contents. I really appreciate that. That really means a lot. So until next time, may peace and power be upon all of you. And it's your girl, and I'm hollering at you guys later. All right, take it easy.